The tools we surround ourselves with are a statement about the type of world that we want to live in. I consider myself lucky to have grown up in an analogue world, but because of what is being marketed as convenience, I think this analogue world is almost forgotten. It is convenient owning a smartphone. Within the smartphone, we have a phone, a camera, a voice recorder, a barometer, a notebook, a diary, a clock, a torch, a video player, as well as the biggest selection of music available. But is life any easier? G'day and welcome to the channel. My name's Barry, or Baz to my mates. Today's topic was decided on after I read a comment from one of our community members on the channel, and she mentioned about how she found today to be really busy and full of pressure. And even though this woman, her name is Meg, and she's in her 30s, she still chooses to use her Nokia phone that she bought back in 2006. And I'm sure there are many others like Meg. Thanks, Meg, too, for sharing this comment. So why would we want to go back to living in an analogue world? For the sake of convenience, are we missing out on something much greater? I've recently bought an old TLR camera. This camera here from the 1960s, probably the early 60s this was produced. Now, when I first bought this camera, I put some film in it and I caught a train into the city. I spent 4 hours in the city, and during that time, I took 5 images. If I'd been using a digital camera on my phone to take images, I'm sure I could have multiplied this by 10. However, using an old analog camera, you're forced to be much more intentional about every shot that you take. You just don't shoot willy-nilly like you would with your phone, especially as on this camera, I only get 12 exposures, 12 images to each roll of film. Now, the thing about film photography is, first of all, I had to decide on what type of film I'd put on the camera. And that decided on the type of images that I wanted to take. Next, because I don't have a light meter on my camera and I don't own a light meter, a handheld one, I had to revise and learn the rule of 16, it's called. And with that, I could calculate roughly the aperture or the shutter speed that I needed to take for each image. There's a lot that we can learn about with photography, especially film photography. In fact, there's so much that somebody once wrote a dictionary on photography. So, I don't think anyone's going to write a dictionary on how to use the camera on our phone, but for analog photography, there's heaps to learn, and this is good. This is good. I enjoy learning, so it's been a really good experience. Another good experience I had from this, from using my old camera, was when I put my film in to get developed. A week later, I got an email saying, "Yep, your film's been developed, and here are the negatives." Or here are the images. And that reminded me of back in the day when, we used to drop our film off at the local chemist, and a week later we'd go and pick it up. And you'd be really excited with the anticipation of opening up your little envelope of images, because so often you forgot every image. You forgot every image that you took, and sometimes there was some nice surprises, and sometimes it was just a good experience. Looking at something, getting it back, and looking at the work that you created. And this kind of makes me think of what's known as the IKEA effect. And they reckon that, we have a certain bias toward, a cognitive bias towards things that we have made ourselves. And I guess this is, it's very evident to me with my photography. I don't get that excited. I'll look at a photo that I might take on my phone, and I'll think, yeah, I like that photo. But with film photography, and when I receive those photos back, I critique them and I work out, okay, I could have used more, I needed more light for this photo here, or this one here is a bit blurry, I should have used a tripod, and things like that. But I take a lot more, it's more of a personal thing when I receive those photographs. It's more something that I've created rather than just press the button on my phone. To add to this effect, for me, I want to relearn how to develop my own films. I learned how to develop films back in the 1980s. I attended a night class at our local community college, and I certainly want to relearn how to do that once again, so that I can put more of me into my final images. Plus, it works out a lot cheaper than having the lab develop your images. So this is what I've learned from swapping out my camera for an analog, my phone camera or my digital camera for an analog camera. And I'm wondering what would happen if I swapped out a lot of my other things for analog processors. Now, I've never really been a big fan of music. I mean, I enjoy music. I enjoy listening to music. But I've never really kind of got into music. I've never attended a live concert. Yeah, and generally when I'm listening to music, I couldn't tell you who the singer is, who the artist is, and I probably couldn't tell you the name of the song. I just enjoy listening to music on my radio or wherever. The one and only vinyl record that I've ever bought, I bought it back in, it was when I would have been in my mid to probably, I would have been about 17, not long after I'd started working full time. And this record was Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Simon and Garfunkel. When I think back now about my choice of buying that record, I actually wonder where I was at. And because I think it's quite a strange selection for a teenager back in the 1970s when there was so much other good music available. Another funny fact is that I married a woman, Karo, who loved her music. She had an incredible voice. She played the piano, she played the guitar, and she also featured on the cover of an LP. This LP, she was a member of the New Zealand Māori Chorale, and they put out 3 records. And here's one of the records that they put out. And that's her next in the orange floral dress. She, I remember she didn't really like these outfits. I mean, she was a teenager when this photo was taken, and she was with all these older women. And but she really loved her music. So I was quite the opposite, really, in that regard. Funnily enough, listening to vinyl LPs seems to have come back in recent years. Now, I can understand why people my age would want to get back into it, be for the nostalgia and from my memory, just the enjoyable listening. But the surprising thing is there are a lot of younger people that are getting into, that are buying turntables and getting into setting up collections of LPs, vinyl LPs. And I wonder why this is. I guess with vinyl, it becomes an intentional choice, much like taking a photograph with an analog camera. You know, you're very intentional about your actions, about either taking the photo or, in this case, what songs you choose to play. You know, the other thing is using vinyl records are a physical thing, you know, which you own, and you don't need to pay a subscription to keep on listening to it with all the ads in between. I think listening to a record is more of a ritualistic and tactile experience, you know, as you choose the record that you want to listen to, you carefully remove the record from its cover. You then carefully place it on the turntable and place the needle down so that you don't create too much crackle and noise, although that is all part of it. So yeah, I think it's just the experience, and often, you know, what we used to do was we'd listen to a record, you know, in the company of mates. They might bring some of their favourite records around, and it was a way to connect with others, especially with those that love the same type of music that you enjoyed. I think this is kind of lost, you know, because music that we listen to on Spotify, you know, it's often young people have, you know, they're plugged in and they're turned off from everyone else. They're either using earphones or earplugs, you know, and so it deconnects them from others around them. I believe also that the music that we listen to from a record player is just a nicer sound, you know, than what you'd get listening to something that's been produced for Spotify. Right behind me is a bookshelf of books. I love books. I always have. I've never used an e-reader, and I can't see myself ever wanting to use one. Again, I like that tactile experience of reading from a book. I like to be able to go back to a paragraph or go back to a part and reread it if I didn't quite take it in the first time. It's just something special about reading from books. So, you know, I mean, I would rather live a life, an intentional life, where I can curate the music that I want to listen to, where I can save my own images as negatives so that they can be used again in the future if necessary. I want to be able to create images that I put a lot of myself into, whether it's through taking the picture or developing them, and a world in which we aren't robbed of the opportunity to enjoy a more personalised experience. Look, I hope this has kind of got you thinking. I plan to do another video in the near future where I'll put together a quiz, and it'll help us decide on whether whether, you know, our preference would be in living in an analog world or a digital world. And I just hope this kind of gives you something to think about. Thanks again for watching. And if you like the video, please hit that like button. Thank you. Bye.